Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
Associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked,
and sometimes what didn't,
you will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts.
And inspire you to do even greater things.
Before we jump into today's conversation, a special thanks to PM Power Consulting for encouraging and supporting this show right from the start. With over 1,000 person-years of collective experience, PM Power has helped many organizations, teams, and individuals chart out their own journeys of excellence and make progress. Thank you, PM Power. Now, let's move to today's episode.
Today, we are talking to a amazing guest, Vijays Kadiala, who's an executive director in DBS Tech and a longtime friend who has braved his initial hiccups in terms of getting through in his academic proficiency and carved a niche for himself through purely working on his curiosity, able to understand the market as well as constantly challenging his comfort zones, that he uses his mantra of 18 months and ensuring that he builds the career step by step. You will find this conversation extremely interesting. Listen on. Hi, Vijay. So happy to have you in the Software People Stories podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And I know it's been a while since we've been speaking about you coming on the podcast. So can you introduce yourself for our listeners in your own words?
Okay, good. Vijays Kadiala. I started my career back in 2001, August 6th. So technically, I've completed 25 years in the industry right now. So I started with a small startup in a 2 BHK apartment. Been there, worked on multiple technologies with the multiple organizations, right from TCS, Infosys to Capgemini to working on a banking industry or giant JPMorgan, and now recently with the DBS. So throughout my career, predominantly spent on data or data-intensive applications, but I do have a solid understanding of application and enterprise architecture. That's related to my work, but I think outside of work, I'm very passionate about going into universities or engineering colleges, trying to share my experiences, both technically and also, career journeys. I probably talk about the failures in the career as opposed to success in the careers, because I strongly believe that one can learn a lot from failures than success. So about 3 to 4 months back, I found my passion is, I've got a lot of ideas and, a lot of concepts that I want to share with broader audience. But technically, I can't go to every university, every student. So I've started on a journey of putting all my stories into books, and that's how my first book launched. And now I've got a few more in line, which are with the publishers right now.
Wow, you have so many facets. I think I'll probably start with your startup to corporate. Many people, like me, have moved from corporate, working in corporate for many, many years and moving into startup. What is your, contrast in terms of working in a smaller setup, and now you're working in JPMorgan Chase has 200,000 people working, and DBS is another 40,000 people. I mean, how do you contrast working in these kind of behemoths to working in a smaller space and creating an identity for yourself? Like you're saying, working with college and becoming an author, creating different identities you have done. So I want to understand, how do you sort of contrast these two?
Okay, so let me start with how I ended up having a part of startup ecosystem, right? So I graduated from Usmania University back in 2001, and my major is computer science. And during my engineering days, I've had a couple of backlogs, right? And that resulted in the lower percentage of my engineering, right? Now, when you have a lower percentage in engineering Usmania University, you are not even eligible to attend most of the campuses, right? So fast forward, May 2001, I graduated from Osman University, but absolutely zero offers in my hand. So then sometime in July, there were like-minded people who came together and said, hey, why don't we look for some opportunities to set up a small company? And that's when one of the co-founder, who's also ex-Osman University alumni, said, why don't we set up a small company who takes care of maintenance of the aircrafts, or building out an application that would help to book flight schedules. So if I contrast that idea, it is very similar to redbus.in, which is you book your seats in a bus, but this one is booking your own seat in a flight on an aircraft. That was the thing. Was it my choice? The answer is no. I had no option because I was literally looking for a job. That's how a couple of friends, or rather like-minded people, came together to form a startup. And this was somewhere in a Medchil in Hyderabad, which is very remote to Hyderabad, in a 2 BHK apartment, where we started buying, monitors, buying CPUs, and we used to assemble everything, put a network label, install a software, everything happened. And I think I still feel that was my best days, I would say. It was there absolutely no politics, no bureaucracies, right? So everything on your own, and you have a clear, tangible outcome that you deliver or showcase. So that was the journey, right? So the reason for me to normally whenever people start in startups, they tend to continue, but I couldn't, because again, there was a pressure. The pressure this time is from my parents and right? They are looking they want me to get married.
That's true.
Right? When you are in a startup, so that time, if you're not working in a TCS, Satyam, Infosys, or a Wipro, and your office is not in a high-tech city, that means you are not working in IT industry. That is the kind of notion was created. Right? Yeah, it was. Right? So, and whenever people come and see me, or they ask which company your son is working for, I said, so there is a company called Camp Systems. So what is that? Is it an IT company? Where is it located? So it created so much pressure that I have to move out of the company so that I can get good matches. So that's how this story started, Gayatri.
Okay.
So I moved out of the company. I've joined another company called Capgemini.
Okay.
Which is again one of the European-based company, but the saga still continued.
Are you in Infosys or Wipro?
Yeah. So my parents went to saw a girl, and they asked, okay, where is your son working? And my parents said, he's working in a Capgemini. And the immediate question was, oh, your son is working in a Gemini TV, yeah? Which Gemini TV? I said, okay. Again, a bit of embarrassment, to explain. So finally, my parents said, this time you have to join TCS. Do not join any other company. We want you to get married, but you need to join TCS. So that's how I ended up joining TCS. But I think, but now if I fast forward 20 years, people are so gung-ho about startup, which is a good thing, as long as there is an idea, there is a purpose-driven outcome, and you see a gap in the journey of a customer. I think these days, it became a norm that I want to be called as an entrepreneur. If I anything that I want to spin up an application and call myself an entrepreneur versus really doing it for purpose, right? But again, everyone have their own opinions and ideas, and at the end of the day, it's the life choice that makes them success or failure.
Thank you. I think it's a very important decision to actually move from a startup to at those days. I think startups also, the duration in which startups used to be surviving, because of the lack of investment and lack of the grants and a lot of these ecosystem providers, I think it was definitely much, much lower than what it is today. So yes. I do think we have made strides. I don't know if we have made enough to sustain this energy, but I do think that's very, very cool story, Vijay. So even now you are involved in the space of, I know in the GCCs you are involved in the current, I know you had won a couple of awards in those spaces. So how do you from a TCS world and Capgemini world, how did you contrast working and thriving in a space of GCCs? I know there are every week we see so many GCCs being formed in India, and successfully so too. And that it's also able to provide a lot more stability, more innovation, and things like that. So I want your perspective on that.
Yeah, so I think that the question is quite big. I'll try to break into small pieces. Let me talk about the GCCs first, right? Now, this is purely my view. The GCCs that we are using, the term, it's basically, I call it the glorified ODCs, right? See, the moment when we say Global Capability Center, the headquarters gets a little bit eye on why you're calling yourself as a Global Capability Center. Why not it as another technology center? What is that so different that you are as a Global Capability Center, which is not what's in Chicago, what's in London, what's in Philippines, etc. Right? So I think, to me, we will keep the GCC aside for time being. We will actually call it as another technology center or another operation center, which is located in India versus located in elsewhere. Right? Now, having said that, I think my first few years with the startup actually led me to a kind of mindset which says, every role that you're playing or every outcome that you're producing is not going to last forever. Right? It has its own lifespan. So back in 2004, my brother said one thing. He said, when you buy a medicine from a medical store, what do you look at? I said, probably I'll go and look at the ingredients of the medicine. That's all I look at. Right? And probably ask the question, okay, should I take this once in thrice in a day or twice in a day, or what's it? Basically, I ask kind of a prescription from the receptionist, right? My brother said like one thing, which is, what would you understand by looking at ingredients? You don't even know what's it, right? You should rather look at expiration date to begin with, because every medicine has an expiration date. So we kind of correlate that analogy to a career. So every role that you play has an expiration date. Before the role expires, you move out of the role. So that kind of went into my mind so hard that I always want to look for any problem that I can solve within 18 months and create a positive customer experience and move on. So all my tenure, either in a JPMorgan or in DBS, was always looking at, okay, there is a problem. Let me go and try to solve the problem, working with the team, working with the stakeholders. And once it is in a decent position, move on to the next problem. Okay, that's how things have started. Now, during this journey, I had an opportunity to work on some of the really good problems that improve the customer experience. But again, the credit goes to all my managers and leadership team who actually trusted me to be part of those journeys to create transformational impact. So every problem, every journey had a positive impact, and that led me to a newer problem, right? And that led me to a newer problem. So that's how my journey in DBS and JP is in about approximately 15 years. Went on working on problems for every 18 months where I had to change my role or a program or a project. So that led me to win awards in Hyderabad, landscape of GCCs or / GICs in the form of cloud, in the form of AI, or in the context of transformational leadership and so on and so forth. But again, the credit goes to the managers and my leadership team, and also the credit goes to the team members who helped me to execute things. At the end of the day, I am nothing, but the ones who are working with me create a value out of me.
See, we are all a product of our circumstances and experiences, and
Right.
it helps to have that sort of a expiration mindset. Then you're constantly figuring out how can I make this better, or make the. In fact, one of the mantras that I use is I have this 3-year theory that every 3 years I want to ensure that my role becomes redundant or becomes not needed. I know you have a shorter period of time, but I have this 3-year thing. In fact, my team members always say it's like a 2.5-year hitch. You always you always think by 2.5 years you ought to finish it and then find the next one.
Absolutely, I think 3 years is the ideal time, because that's when you learn and you contribute back to it.
Correct. So, so when you look at your career graph and working in various roles and portfolio, so what are the few highlights that you can share? Some of the programs, some of the decisions that you have taken that you can you're extremely proud of what you've done?
I think back in 2004, when I was leaving my first company, I joined Capgemini, and I had no clue what project I was going to work on. I've been given multiple options, but for some reason, I choose to go with the production support. So for the first 3 years on my startup, 3.5 years, I was working completely on application development side. I had no idea about what production support is. So when I joined Capgemini, I was a production support analyst working in the night shift. And the application that we were supporting is one of the US based application. So, and that too developed in Java, JSP, and web servers, and had absolutely no idea what that is, right, and struts. So I think the decision that I made was, okay, let me just explore this production support, what it is, what it's trying to offer. I think that to me, that was the first or second biggest decision in my career, that, try to be a comfortable position in an uncomfortable zone, which means you have no idea, right, but you're still trying to make things better in that area. Right? That gave me a lot of confidence that, hey, you can do things if in case you are passionate to do things, or you are passionate about learning something new and not afraid of failures. That was one big decision. Right? As I said in the past, that I've joined TCS because me want to get married. So when I joined TCS, again, the first assignment was to be a PL SQL developer in Oracle. I had no idea what PL SQL it is that time. I didn't write any major programs over there. I know how to write a SQL program, but not beyond that. So again, the decision was, should I be part of a PL SQL developer role and do these things and so client, or should I be part of a different technology stack and work for something which is internal projects? I think the decision that I made was, I want to work on PL SQL, but fortunately at the same time, I've been placed into in a client's program. The client name is JPMorgan. So that was my starting phase of me getting into finance, which is back in 2005 August. I think that was a very bold decision to move into financial space as a PL SQL developer, right? That's the third biggest one. My fourth one back in, again, 2007, where I wanted to go to US, and for me to go to the US, I need to pick a role which is a little bigger than what the role that I was playing in TCS. So I picked up this data architect role, again for JPMorgan client in New York, which is in the middle of the city. So again, it's a new territory, both location-wise and also role-wise. And I was a bit skeptical how am I going to play, because first time outside of India. 2, there was no one supporting you because you are alone all by yourself. 3, you need to understand the slang or the communication, because being in India, studying in India, Telugu medium student, only short stint on English medium, etc. Trying to understand the slang from a US was not easy. I think I've had a lot of challenges, but I think I made the right decision to move to US in 2007 to pick up this data architect role. That was 4th. And now fast forward, but there is one role back in 2018 in JPMorgan in Hyderabad Tech Center, where I was actually managing a small team of 14 to 15 members, as a VP, right? So my manager said, I want you to move out of team management role and go as an individual contributor and set an example on how you can be an executive director as an individual contributor.
Wow. Okay.
So at that point in time, there were probably 1 or 2 people in the entire JPMorgan Chase India who are executive directors as an individual contributors.
Okay.
Right. And the ones who are there, they moved from US to India. Right. So this kind of, for me, is like the first person to apply or to rather prepare for this role. Right. So and I still remember, it was a conversation that I had in month of September in one of the conference room. The name is Dilshuk Nagar, where my manager said, it's a make or break for you. If you make it, you'll be like the role model in the back. If you break it, you'll have 2 more years delay in your entire promotion cycle. I said, let's just do it. If in case your manager says trusting you that you can do it, I think there is a merit to it. So that was the biggest decision I made in my life, that to put a risk on my promotion. Okay, if I continue in my current role, I would have got it in the next cycle, right? But moving into a different role, at a different capacity, was the biggest choice.
Okay.
So when I did that, that was a fantastic decision, I would say.
So those are the bets that you have to take on yourself, right? And time to time, See, if you don't
Yes.
take those bets in terms of, are you able to take a simpler role or a role that needs to you to learn? For example, I'm sure you taking that PL SQL is still keeping you in good stead in terms of data, in terms of ability to be hands-on in helping the team and building that expertise, right? I think
Yep.
we don't make. I often tell to people, we don't make a lot of decisions in technology sector for ourselves, because in fact teams are actually well structured, but at the right times, if we make those choices, it really puts you in a different league of yourself, right?
Absolutely. I think I strongly believe what you said, Gayatri, which is all about you need to take a decision. So sometimes the decision that you're taking may be right or may be wrong, right? Unless you take a decision, unless you work towards that decision, whether, to make it successful, at the end of the day, it is in your hands only. One can say that, there a lot depends on the manager, a lot depends on the ecosystem. But if you believe that you can do it, right, and you can actually make things work by working with everyone. At the most, what you have, you're going to lose about a year career. That's okay. You have almost like a 35 years of career. Right? You can make things better, as you move forward.
So, talking about books, I know I'm interested to read, talk about your book. In fact, the 100-Year Life, the recent book that I recently read, says that you start your career at 2021. You actually work for about 50 to 60 years if you need to keep your mental agility in place. So we are not even talking about anywhere between 30-35 years when our previous generation retired. I mean, we are talking about a much longer career where you have to constantly adapt to different models, right? So I wanted to talk about your book, identity. You're author of a book, and you're also saying that a couple of more books are on the way. So how is that? How do you make time in both working professional, having a stressful job, managing so many schedule dependencies and everything, and I'm certain publishers also are giving you a hard time in terms of schedule, right? How do you manage, or are you also taking Claude along with you on it?
Yeah. So let me give you a background on how the whole point around when Dali started to write a book. Right. The first point was for the last 3 to 4 years, I've been giving a lot of trainings or talks on leadership, and my talks are never based on any framework. It was always based on real life example scenarios. One fine day, I created a leadership training based on the driving skills. How you get into the car, how you start your car, how you take the car on the road. When you are at a signal, where exactly do you stop at the signal? When you are doing a free left turn, how do you take a free left turn? How do you take a right turn? How do you move, on a straight line when you have a junction? So based on this, I prepared a simple training, and based on how the participants were actually driving the car, I was able to make out, what kind of leadership qualities that you're going to exhibit or been exhibiting, either at home or at workplace. And that became quite a hit, among the participants, that how easy to correlate your leadership behaviors, to back to a driving. That was a starting point, Gayatri. And again, all the best ideas comes with your friends and peers and managers and team. So the ones who attended said, why don't you come this into a book? We want to read this, not just driving, but I think there are so many. So that's how the idea started about 2 years back. That the leadership is not built or created within the four walls of a room. So my theory was always like, it was already there in you. How you exhibit at different places, actually makes you a leader, and then takes those same behaviors when you go to office. So that's how the book idea started. I've been scribbling a lot, in terms of how to get started and etc. But again, finding time is not easy. Again, I started about 2 years back. So finally, I and my son said, let's just take some time out. Let's just put something, scribble, right? And then, start leveraging the LLMs. We said, concept is us, idea is ours. We have examples. Let's write in a paper, and then let's use the power of Claude or OpenAI or LLMs, etc. So that's how the journey started. So it actually talks about multiple places. How you behave at home, how you behave on the road, how you behave in the shopping malls, how you behave in home theater, theaters, how you behave at the airport. So all these are basically different places where a human being exhibits different behaviors. So try to correlate all those behaviors and have a correlation to what we do at workplace.
Okay.
That's how things have started.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to reading the book. I'm hoping that, when we meet, I'll get a signed book. And do you continue to now work with university students and give them exposure in terms of how you're doing things and everything? I remember you had started the whole blockchain awareness part back in 2021, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Yeah.
So are you continuing those? Okay.
So I'm still continuing my personal capacities because I always feel that, you always have to give back to the society, right? And my way of giving back to society is, take some time off on Saturday or Sundays, go to universities and engineering colleges, try to teach them whatever that we know that they can accelerate the journey. I've been doing that for past 14 years and I still want to continue to do the same. But now it is just that, since I can't go to every university, because there are so many universities, so I started putting everything together in a book so that I can, distribute or share the same experience, but in the form of books.
Fantastic. In fact, in the recent times, I go to colleges for their incubation as well as working with part of doing workshops with the student entrepreneurs. I'm realizing that that is something that we never got when we were in college. In terms of unfiltered opinions, right? Unfiltered, no slides, no filter, nothing. You just talk from a experience and what works and what doesn't work. I think that's a very wonderful way. In fact, I learn most of the time while I may be the person in the podium, but many times when you interact with the students and professors also, you get a lot of understanding of the challenges that they're having. And I wonder, how do you make this learning even deeper and even more impactful?
So I think, as you rightly mentioned, I think experience teaches a lot. To go with the kind of experience that we had, you and me having almost 20 years experience, going to universities and giving them, hey, this is how we transform our career. Right? It becomes a kind of a reference book to them. It may not be exactly that they're going to play, but if they can identify, hey, so-and-so time Gayatri mentioned that so-and-so situation that she has gone through and she took so-and-so decision, and that becomes a reference point to them. So all they need is basically a reference points. A same situation, probably you would have behaved differently and I would have behaved differently. But to them is basically, hey, two different personalities, two different identities, but the same situation, but they took two different decisions. That's enough for them to accelerate the learning.
Absolutely. I think India as a country also runs on the hope. How do you ensure that young minds are energized as well as able to think differently and move differently, right? So I know we've been talking nonstop for 30 minutes. So I wanted to hear any feedback or any advice that you want to give to professionals who are listening. We typically have professionals from software who listen to us. So any thoughts,
So I'll try to clear some of the myths. Again, I've been hearing during my journey was you say no to work, meaning when you have enough on your plate, say no to it for any new work. But I never said no to anything, even if I was full on my plate. I always say yes first and then find a way to help the person. Because if somebody is coming into you and saying, I need help from you or I need you to do this work, that means you are chosen one. If you say no, tomorrow you may not get opportunity, right? So, okay, that saying yes might cost you a bit more because you need to stretch a couple of more hours, but it is okay as long as you are creating a value. So again, that helped me. Whether it's going to help others, I do not know. But for every yes that you say, there is always a plus and a minus. Plus is basically it will increase your reputation, and minus basically it adds more stress to yourself to complete one more task one more outcome. But at the end of the day, what you want to choose is with the individual. That's one. The second is sometimes career planning works very well, but sometimes you need to take a risk in between career plans. To me, I try to use the analogy of, a national highway, right? Where toll gates are nothing but a kind of checkpoints for you to see whether you want to run on the same pace or you want to take a detour and find an alternative path. But similarly, in a career also, you need to find yourself something which is uncomfortable to you and see whether it is working for you or not. Because most of the times, you would be put into the projects which maybe you're not comfortable working with. For example, this is again, I would call it the third myth, which is we are so tuned working with our managers. And wherever manager goes, we also go there. Right? Is that a good thing? People might say yes or no, but to me, it's actually a bad thing because you already work with the manager. Right? You know how the manager works. What's the characteristic of a manager? And you basically both knows what's the pros and cons. But if you want to be a leader who can manage, X to Y number of people, you need to understand the personalities. You can only understand the personalities if you start working with the different people, not just the team, but also your manager. So I always recommend people to work with the different managers and try and understand the personalities so that you will be a good leader fast forward 20 years from now. So that's, to me, most of the times now I see people are leaving or moving to the same manager that they worked in the past for the last 5 years.
You're saying about, staying with the manager and what it takes to have an alternative view of being a manager. And I truly believe those things, Vijay.
Yeah, so that's my fourth one. And my fifth one is try to look for the organizations which would give you cultural learnings. Because see, one is working with the people that will get you know the personality. Second is you also need to understand the culture. One, you can learn a lot from working with the different people within India where they're coming from north, south, east, west, right? That itself is a great aspect for us to learn the cultural aspect. But at the same time, we also need to understand the cultural aspects of the rest of the world. For example, when you're working when you're working with the people who are based out of US or US banks and etc., you got a different culture altogether. Right? When you're working with organizations who are based out of Asia Pac, whether it's India, China, or Hong Kong, Singapore, you got a different aspect of how the culture works, etc. Right? But when you work with a Middle East, a different culture altogether, the kind of values that they exhibit, etc. Europe, right? So I always believe that don't stick to one culture. Most of us have started career with working with the US organizations and still continuing with the same organizations, right? When they pivot to a Europe-based organization or an Asia-Pac-based organization, they're not able to work so well, and they want to go back to US-based. I think I want everyone to have this also part of their profile that they work with the different organizations which are based out of different countries. So I'll tell you the best benefit of working with different organizations in different countries. One, it's a free ticket for you to go and roam around the country.
And that is true.
Right? Which no one is realizing the fact that they have the opportunity. For example, the one who worked in US, they can go to US, part of the company visit and probably have an extended stay and then roam around the country. That's a good segue. Same goes with Europe. Same goes with China or Indonesia or Hong Kong or Singapore or Australia or New Zealand. Great opportunity.
True. I have personally worked in all the three zones, and and it is also nuanced leadership traits that you pick up in each of these ones. So you said about no, actually, I actually belong to the other club of saying yes to everything. In fact, I say yes to everything, and in Sadhguru, I know it's a little philosophical. He says, "Ellavattrukkum asaipadu." Basically, look for everything. So you're actually embrace everything. It sort of brings the best out of you. So I love advices. So I have another question that I've been asking of late. I know it is a little uncomfortable question. So with the whole ChatGPT and Claude and all the AI tools and everything, right? How do you think our roles will change in 5 years from now? I used to have a 10 years before this question, but it's hard to look at a time turner and see how we see ourselves 10 years. But how about taking a bet 5 years from now, maybe 2031? How will it look like?
So let's start with the 5 years, and after that we'll see. Right, your IT industry will go through a severe transformation. Right? I'll take a very simple example. Let's say we have business analysts who are writing, user stories or use cases based on your business requirement document. Are we going to have the role in the future once we have the cloud and agents running, etc.? The answer is I doubt, and I don't think so. We will have BA per se. Right? Probably the role is going to transform. But the same goes with the tester. Right? We've saw a transformation journey of manual tester to automation testers. Now we'll have agents who will do the testing for us, developers/engineers who are writing code. I don't think they're going to write the code thousands of lines going forward. They're probably writing good specs. Those specs would be translated into code. But at the end of the day, human still need to review things. You can't let everything, off the chart to agents. So fast forward, the future of the roles are not fully into specialized roles. Some roles would go in as someone who's a software engineer along with the domain expertise. So the roles will be no different, but more of the difference will be a little bit blurred. So the one who knows domain can also now write code. The one who knows coding should also know domain or business knowledge. So the future of the roles are more of, to me, is like M-shaped developers, Gayatri. So I has nothing but a deep technical expertise. Right? T is nothing but you have depth in one area and have a breadth in a couple of areas. M is, to me, basically you have a 3 lines to the D, which is a combination of 5, which means you have multiple deep engineering skills with the domain knowledge. So the roles will transform. Will we have the same kind of roles that we are playing right now with the same kind of quantity in the future? The answer is no. There will be a lot of low-hanging work or things agents will do for us. Right. So more than, to me, of any of these roles, I would actually encourage to have, learn, I would say 3 skills, or rather 4 skills. 1, curiosity. The second is your domain experience. Third, I would call it the orchestration skills, which means now you need to know what work can be done by agents, what work can only be done by humans, what work can be a combination of human and agents. And fourth, but not the least, is the judgmental skills. Because AI will give you the output, but at the end of the day, human need to take a decision. Human need to take a decision when there is a hallucination, when there is an ambiguity, when there is a multiple answers to the same question. So to me, all these 4 are important. But fundamentally, we are lacking on the first one, which is a curiosity. Because curiosity is nothing but asking why. Like, why is that? Why is in this way? Historically, in our culture, we never encourage why. We always, if somebody, like, for example, my son keeps always asking me, hey, why are we doing this? Why? So you ask all the question, what starts with the why. I said, boss, stop it, just do it. So we've actually grown up in a culture where we do not encourage why. We only say, just do it. So I think the younger generation who are right now are getting into IT industry or getting into or moving out of campus, they have this curiosity skills, which is really good. But I think the future is bright for India with the younger generation who would help us to, remove all the myths and barriers that we carried out in the past of not asking the questions and etc. I think those will go away. But agents or LLMs or any of this powerful AI is there. We just have to embrace it. Yeah. But anyone who's listening to this podcast, I would actually ask them to watch 3 movies to know the future. 1, Terminator 2, which came in probably 1989 to 1990 time frame. Right? Arnold Schwarzenegger. That was the first of his movie, right? That talks about the machines rising. The second, about 15 years back, there is a movie called I, Robot from Will Smith.
Yeah, I have seen that as well. Yeah.
It talks about the emotions of the robot or an agent. Right? The third, I would actually encourage them, is called Surrogate, which is from Bruce Willis.
Okay.
So to me, when I watch these 2 movies over and over, and I see where we are getting into.
Actually, I will give you 2 more. One is Passengers. Passengers, it talks about how self-healing and predictive maintenance and building that sort of a model in each of the sector. I think passengers one I also admire. And another is the alternative philosophy is Wall-E, not to do how human beings do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I think this has been a very, very fantastic conversation, Vijay, in terms of future gazing as well as being grounded and accepting our failures, accepting our shortcomings, as well as understanding our strengths. And I think this has been a blast for, I hope our listeners also enjoy the conversation as much as I did. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And all the very best.
Thank you. Ciao. See you.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People Stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.